The rifle barrel felt cold against Clara Whitmore's palm as she stared at the Lakota warrior standing in her father's trading post. Most men looked away when she met their eyes. Not this one. Tasunka Red Elk watched her like a wolf watches prey, patient, hungry, inevitable. 3 days he'd been here, trading furs and dried meat, and 3 days she'd felt his gaze burning through every wall she'd ever built around herself. Her father noticed nothing, but Clara knew. The way he looked at her wasn't just desire. It was a promise. And promises from men like him were dangerous. Welcome to a story of forbidden passion on the untamed frontier. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this tale travels. And if this story captures you, hit that like button and stay until the end. The Northern Montana Territory had a way of stripping people down to their essential selves. No room for pretense when winter could kill you in an afternoon. When the nearest town was 3 days' hard ride. When survival meant reading weather, animals, and strangers with the same sharp attention. Clara Whitmore had been reading all three since she was old enough to stand behind the trading post counter. At 23, she could track game, cure hides, speak enough Crow and Lakota to negotiate trade, and shoot the eye out of a hawk at 50 yards. She'd had to. Her mother had died bringing her into the world, and her father, Ezra Whitmore, had raised her the only way he knew how, as a partner, not a daughter. Some called it unnatural. Clara called it survival. The trading post sat at the edge of the Judith Basin, a squat log structure that served as general store, meeting place, and neutral ground for trappers, ranchers, and tribal hunters. Ezra had built a reputation for fair dealing, and that reputation kept them alive. Clara had learned early that fairness and kindness were not the same thing. You could trade honestly with a man and still watch him like a rattlesnake. That's what she'd been doing for 3 days with Tasunka Red Elk. He'd arrived on a gray morning when frost still clung to the grass, leading 2 pack horses loaded with beaver pelts, wolf skins, and elk hides. Not unusual. Lakota hunters traded here regularly, especially during the lean months when ammunition and coffee were worth more than gold. What was unusual was him. Most men, white or native, came in loud or quiet, friendly or guarded, but always predictable. You learned to read them in the first 5 minutes. Tasunka Red Elk defied reading. He was tall, even for Lakota, with shoulders that filled the doorway and hands that looked capable of splitting wood or breaking necks with equal ease. His hair hung loose past his shoulders, black as creek water at midnight, and his face carried the kind of hard beauty that made Clara think of knife edges and thunder. But it was his eyes that unsettled her. Dark, steady, patient, and always, always watching. The first day, she'd attributed it to normal wariness. Strangers assessed each other, natural. The second day, she'd started to feel the weight of that gaze differently. Not threatening exactly, but intentional, focused. By the third day, Clara's nerves felt stripped raw. "Your father trades well," Tasunka said in careful English, his accent thick but his grammar precise. He stood at the counter, examining a knife with the same thorough attention he seemed to give everything. "He's fair," Clara replied, keeping her voice neutral. She was measuring out coffee beans, trying to ignore how aware she was of exactly where he stood, how the morning light cut across his profile, how his presence seemed to fill the entire room, even when he stood perfectly still. Fair is rare. Fair keeps you breathing out here. His mouth quirked slightly, not quite a smile. Truth. Ezra was out back checking the new shipment of traps. Clara was alone in the store with Tasunka, and the silence between them felt thick enough to choke on. She poured the coffee into a cloth sack, tied it, set it on the counter. "That everything?" "No." She waited. He set the knife down carefully, then lifted his eyes to hers. The impact of that direct gaze hit her like a physical force. "I want to know why you avoid me," he said quietly. Clara's hands stilled. "I'm not avoiding you. I'm working." "You turn away when I enter. You send your father to negotiate. You stand where the counter is between us." His voice remained calm, factual. "You avoid me." Heat crept up her neck. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" "Yes." He tilted his head slightly, studying her with that same unnerving patience. "I make you uncomfortable." "No." "Liar." The word was soft but absolute. Clara's temper flared, welcome, familiar, safer than the other feelings churning in her chest. You don't know me well enough to call me a liar. I know you well enough to see what you hide. And what exactly am I hiding? Tasunka took a step closer to the counter. Not threatening, not aggressive, but deliberate. The same thing I am. Her breath caught. The air between them felt charged, electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. Clara forced herself to hold his gaze. You should finish your business and go. Should I? Yes. Why? Because the words tangled on her tongue. Because you look at me like you can see straight through to my bones. Because every time you walk in here, my heart does something strange and reckless. Because I don't know what to do with the way my skin feels too tight when you're near. She couldn't say any of that. Because your trading's done, she finished weakly. Tasunka's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or satisfaction. My trading is done, he agreed. But I'm not finished here. Then what? The back door opened. Ezra's heavy boots on the wood floor. Tasunka stepped back from the counter smoothly, his face returning to neutral, polite attention. But his eyes stayed on Clara for one more heartbeat, a promise. Ezra Whitmore was a practical man who'd survived 30 years on the frontier by keeping his head down and his powder dry. He'd seen enough bloodshed, enough stupidity, enough grief. He wanted quiet. So when he walked into his trading post and felt the tension crackling between his daughter and the Lakota warrior, every instinct in his body went on alert. Everything settled? Ezra asked, his voice deliberately casual. Yes, Tasunka replied. Your daughter trades as well as you. She should. Taught her myself. Ezra moved behind the counter, placing himself between them with the ease of long practice. You heading back north? In the morning. Long ride this time of year. I've made longer. Ezra studied the warrior with the assessing eye of a man who'd spent decades judging character. Tasunka met his gaze calmly, respectfully, giving nothing away. Good sign or bad, Ezra couldn't tell. Well, you're welcome to make camp by the creek, Ezra offered. Water's clean, and there's decent grass for your horses. I'm grateful. They concluded their business with the kind of efficient courtesy that marked dealings between men who understood their positions. Tasunka gathered his supplies, nodded to Ezra, let his eyes touch Clara's face once more, brief, burning, and left. The door closed. Ezra waited a full minute before speaking. Clara. She was staring at the closed door, her hands gripping the counter edge. Clara. She blinked, looked at him. What? Don't. One word, but it carried the weight of everything unsaid. Clara's jaw tightened. Don't what? Whatever you're thinking, don't. I'm not thinking anything. You're a terrible liar, always have been. Ezra's voice wasn't angry, just tired. That man is Lakota. You understand what that means. I understand he's a customer who trades fairly. He's more than that, and you damn well know it. Ezra leaned against the counter, suddenly looking every one of his 56 years. I've watched men look at women my whole life, girl. I know the difference between looking and seeing, and that man sees you. Clara's heart hammered. So what if he does? So everything. Ezra's voice turned hard. His people and ours. We're balanced on a knife edge out here. The treaties are worth less than the paper they're printed on. One incident, one insult, one wrong move, and people die. You understand that? I haven't done anything wrong. Not yet. The words hung between them like smoke. Clara wanted to argue, to defend herself, to rage against the unfairness of it all. But Ezra was right about one thing. The frontier was brutal to people who crossed lines. I'll stay away from him, she said finally. Ezra studied her face, clearly unconvinced. See that you do. But staying away from Tasunka Red Elk proved impossible. Not because he forced himself into her path, he didn't, but because Clara couldn't stop thinking about him. That night, lying in her narrow bed above the store, she stared at the rough-hewn ceiling and replayed every moment, every word, every look. I want to know why you avoid me, The directness of it still shocked her. White men danced around attraction with games and implications. Tasunka had simply stated truth. You avoid me. And she had. Because looking at him too long made her feel things she'd never felt before. Hunger and fear and recognition all twisted together. I know you well enough to see what you hide. Clara pressed her palms against her eyes, frustrated with herself. She'd spent 23 years learning to be strong, independent, capable. She could survive winter storms, negotiate with hardened trappers, defend the trading post with her father's rifle. But one Lakota warrior with patient eyes had walked into her life and stripped away every defense like they were made of paper. What frightened her most wasn't the attraction itself. It was how inevitable it felt, like she'd been walking toward this moment her entire life without knowing it. Clara woke before dawn to the sound of horses. She dressed quickly, pulled her hair into a practical braid, and descended to the store. Through the window, she could see Tasunka preparing to leave, his movements efficient as he secured packs to his horses. She should stay inside. Let him go. Forget this ever happened. Her hand was on the door before she made a conscious decision. The morning air hit her face, cold and clean. Tasunka looked up at the sound of the door, and for a moment they simply stood there, 30 feet of frost-covered ground between them. Clara walked forward. She had no plan, no idea what she would say. She only knew she couldn't let him leave without what? She didn't know. Tasunka waited, still as stone, as she approached. You're leaving, Clara said. Obvious. Stupid. Yes. When will you trade again? Spring, maybe sooner if the hunting is good. 3 months, maybe more. Clara's chest felt tight. Safe travels, she managed. Tasunka's dark eyes searched her face. Is that what you came out here to say? I don't know what I came out here to say. The honesty surprised them both. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the horses shifting and the distant call of a crow. Your father is right to warn you, Tasunka said finally. He gestured between them, a simple movement that encompassed everything, is dangerous. I know. My people would question, your people would condemn. I know that too. Then you understand why I should leave, why you should go back inside, why we should forget this. Clara lifted her chin. Is that what you want? To forget? Tasunka's jaw tightened. For the first time since she'd met him, she saw something crack in that careful control. What I want, he said, his voice low and rough, is impossible. Why? Because I want to know everything about you, the sound of your laugh, the weight of your hair in my hands, the taste of your mouth, the thoughts you hide behind those fierce eyes. He took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. I want to learn you, like I learned the land, every season, every mood, every secret place. Clara couldn't breathe. I want to wake with you, sleep with you, fight with you, build something with you that neither of our peoples have words for yet. His eyes burned into hers. That's what I want, and it's impossible. Her voice came out barely a whisper. What if it's not? Clara. What if we're wrong about what's possible? Tasunka shook his head slowly. The world doesn't change because we want it to. Maybe not the whole world. Clara's heart thundered so hard she was sure he could hear it. But our piece of it? Maybe we could. The cost. I know the cost. Her voice rose, fierce with sudden certainty. I've spent my whole life being practical, being smart, being safe, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of small dreams and careful choices and living like I'm already dead just to make sure I survive. This isn't about dreams, Tasunka said urgently. This is about reality, blood, consequences. Then let there be consequences. Clara stepped forward until only a foot separated them. I've never felt about any man the way I feel when you look at me. Never. And maybe that makes me reckless or stupid or doomed, but I don't care anymore. I'm tired of being afraid. You should be afraid, he said roughly. I'm afraid. Of what? His hands came up, hovering near her face, but not quite touching. Of this. Of wanting you so badly it makes me forget everything I know about the world. Of how you look at me like you're the only person who's ever really seen me, Clara finished. Tasunka's breath came hard. Yes, because you are. The words fell between them like stones in still water. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Tasunka's control shattered. His hands framed her face, rough and gentle all at once, and he kissed her with the kind of desperate intensity that felt like falling and flying simultaneously. Clara gasped against his mouth, her hands fisting in his shirt, every nerve in her body igniting. The kiss was nothing like the fumbling attempts from ranch hands who'd tried their luck. This was heat and hunger and homecoming all twisted together, a claiming that went both directions. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tasunka pressed his forehead to hers. "This changes everything," he said. "I know. There's no going back. I don't want to go back." He pulled away slightly to look at her, his eyes searching. "Your father will have to understand. Your people, let them talk." Clara. His voice carried a weight of responsibility, of understanding consequences she might not have fully grasped. "Listen to me. If we do this, if we choose this, there will be pain, rejection, danger. I can't protect you from all of it. I'm not asking you to protect me from the world," Clara said steadily. "I'm asking you to face it with me." Tasunka studied her face for a long time, and she saw the moment he made his decision. "Tonight," he said. "There's a place 2 miles north, a grove of cottonwood trees near where the creek bends. I know it. Meet me there, after your father sleeps." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, achingly tender. "Come to me, and we'll decide together what we're willing to risk." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Tasunka kissed her once more, soft, sweet, a promise, then released her and mounted his horse in one fluid motion. She watched him ride north, following the creek line, until he disappeared into the gray morning mist. When she turned back toward the trading post, her father stood in the doorway. His face told her he'd seen everything. But the day crawled past like wounded prey. Ezra didn't speak to Clara beyond necessary exchanges about inventory and trading. His silence was worse than anger. It was disappointment, heavy and cold. Clara worked mechanically, measuring flour, cutting rope, recording sales in the ledger. But her mind was miles away, caught between fear and anticipation. What was she doing? Meeting a Lakota warrior in secret, risking everything her father had built, courting disaster for what? For the first time in her life, she felt alive. That was the terrible truth of it. 23 years she'd spent being responsible, being careful, being the daughter Ezra needed. And she'd been content with that, or thought she was. Until Tasunka looked at her and saw not just Ezra Whitmore's daughter, not just the woman who ran the trading post, but her, Clara, in all her hidden hunger and restless dreams. He saw her, and she couldn't unknow that feeling. As sunset painted the Montana sky in shades of blood and gold, Ezra finally broke his silence. "I won't stop you," he said quietly. Clara looked up from the beans she was sorting. "What?" "Tonight, when you sneak out to meet him." Ezra's face was haggard. "I won't stop you, but I need you to understand what you're choosing. Papa, let me finish." He set down the axe he'd been sharpening. "Your mother, your real mother, not the story I've told you. She wasn't from around here. She was Métis, French and Cree, beautiful and fierce, and so damn sure she could make the world bend to her will." Clara's breath caught. Ezra had never spoken of her mother beyond the barest facts. "We met during a bad winter. I was trapping north of here, half frozen and stupid. She saved my life, and I fell in love with her before I even knew her name." Ezra's voice went rough. "Everyone told us it was impossible. Her family, my family, the traders, the tribes. Everyone had a reason why we couldn't be together." "What did you do?" "We ran. Built this place from nothing, tried to create something new." He looked at Clara with devastating sadness. "And for 7 years it worked. We were happy. Built a life, built this post, built a reputation. Then she got pregnant with you and everything went wrong." Clara had known her mother died in childbirth, but Ezra had never shared details. "The midwife wouldn't come because your mother was Métis. The doctor was 3 days away. I watched her die slowly, knowing if she'd been white, if I'd been different, if the world had been kinder." His voice broke. She died because we chose each other. That's the truth I've never told you. Tears burned Clara's eyes. So when I say I understand, Ezra continued, I mean it. When I say the cost is high, I know exactly how high. And when I tell you I won't stop you, it's because I know you'll go anyway. You're your mother's daughter, stubborn and brave and willing to pay any price for truth. Clara crossed the room and hugged him hard. Ezra held her for a long moment, then pulled back and gripped her shoulders. But hear me clear, girl. If you walk out that door tonight, your life changes forever. You'll face hatred from both sides. You'll lose friends. You might lose me if I can't protect you from what's coming. And that man, he gestured toward the north. He better be worth it. He better be willing to fight as hard as you will, because the frontier doesn't forgive. It just takes and takes until there's nothing left. He's worth it, Clara whispered. Then go, Ezra said roughly, and may whatever forces guide this world watch over you both. The cottonwood grove stood silhouetted against the star-scattered sky when Clara approached on foot, her heart hammering hard enough to bruise. She'd waited until Ezra's lamp went dark, then slipped out with nothing but the clothes on her back and a knife at her belt. The 2-mile walk through the darkness had given her plenty of time to reconsider. She kept walking anyway. Tasunka was waiting beneath the largest cottonwood, his horses grazing nearby. He stood when he heard her approach, his entire body tense. You came, he said, and she heard the surprise in his voice. Did you think I wouldn't? I hoped, but hope and certainty are different things. Clara stopped a few feet away, suddenly uncertain. In the daylight, with anger and desire driving her, everything had seemed clear. But here, under the vast Montana sky, the enormity of what they were risking pressed down on her. I'm afraid, she admitted. Good, Tasunka said. Fear means you understand the stakes. Are we making a mistake? He considered the question seriously. Maybe. Probably. But some mistakes are worth making. That's not very reassuring. I'm not here to reassure you, Clara. I'm here to tell you the truth. He took a step closer. The truth is, I've been watching you for 2 seasons. I traded at your post in summer, saw you laugh at something your father said, saw the way you moved through the world like you owned it, and I couldn't stop thinking about you. 2 seasons? Clara's voice rose. This isn't... No, not obsession. Recognition. Tasunka's eyes held hers. I come from a people who believe in visions, in signs, in the idea that some paths are meant to be walked. When I saw you, something in me said there, like finding true north. So I came back, traded when I didn't need to trade, watched when I should have looked away. Waited to see if you felt it too. Felt what? This. Whoa. He gestured between them. This pull. Like we're 2 parts of something that's supposed to be whole. Clara's breath shook. I feel it. I've felt it since the moment you walked in. Then we're either both crazy, Tasunka said, or we're standing at the beginning of something that matters. How do we know which? We don't. We choose and live with the consequences. He held out his hand. Clara looked at it, strong, scarred, steady, and understood that taking it meant crossing a line she could never uncross. She thought of her father's story, her mother's death, the price of choosing love in a world built on division. Then she thought of spending the rest of her life wondering what if. Clara took his hand. Tasunka pulled her close, and this time when he kissed her, it was slow, deep, thorough, a claiming and a surrender all at once. They sank down onto the thick grass beneath the cottonwoods, and Clara learned the feel of his skin, the sound of her name in his language, the way desire could be fierce and tender simultaneously. When they finally lay tangled together under the stars, Tasunka traced the line of her jaw with gentle fingers. No going back now, he murmured. I know. Your people will hate you for this. Some will. Mine will question my judgment. Will they exile you? No, but they'll test you. Test us. Make sure you're not using me, that I'm not betraying them. Clara propped herself up on one elbow. And if I can't pass their tests, then we'll face that together. His hand slid into her hair. I'm not letting you go, Clara Whitmore. Not now. Not after this. You're mine and I'm yours, and the world can damn well adjust. The fierce certainty in his voice made her chest ache. "What do we do now?" she whispered. "We figure it out, one day at a time." Tasunka pulled her down for another kiss. "Starting with telling your father the truth tomorrow." Clara laughed shakily. "He already knows. He saw us this morning." "And?" "He told me the cost would be high, but he wouldn't stop me." Tasunka absorbed that. "He's a wiser man than most. He loved a woman like my mother, lost her because the world was cruel. I think part of him wants to see if we can do better." "Then we'll do better," Tasunka said. "We'll build something stronger than hatred, something that lasts." They lay there as the stars wheeled overhead, making quiet promises and plans, two people choosing each other despite everything the world would throw at them. And when dawn began to pale the eastern sky, they rose and walked back toward the trading post hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Together. Ezra was waiting on the porch when they crested the last hill, the trading post visible in the gray morning light. He stood with his arms crossed, rifle leaning against the wall beside him. Not threatening, but present. A reminder that choices had consequences. Clara felt Tasunka's hand tighten around hers. "Let me speak first," she said quietly. "This concerns us both." "I know, but he's my father." Tasunka nodded once, his jaw tight. They crossed the final distance in silence, their boots crunching on frost-hardened ground. The horses in the corral lifted their heads to watch, breath steaming in the cold air. Ezra's eyes tracked their joined hands, then moved to Clara's face. Whatever he saw there made his shoulders drop slightly. "Coffee's hot," he said gruffly. "Come inside before you freeze." The trading post felt different in the morning light, smaller somehow, more fragile. Clara had spent her entire life within these walls, but standing here with Tasunka beside her, she saw it through new eyes. The careful neutrality her father had maintained, the delicate balance that kept them safe, suddenly seemed as thin as river ice in spring. Ezra poured 3 cups of coffee in silence, then gestured to the rough-hewn table where they conducted business. They sat, Clara and Tasunka on one side, Ezra on the other. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of them. "So," Ezra said finally, "you planning to tell me what happens next, or am I supposed to guess?" Clara met his gaze steadily. "I love him. You've known him 3 days. I've known him long enough." Ezra's eyes shifted to Tasunka. "And you? You love my daughter after 3 days of trading and 1 night under the stars?" Tasunka didn't flinch from the hard stare. "I've watched her for months, learned her, seen her strength, her fire, her heart. And yes, I love her. More importantly, I see her worth. I will honor her, protect her, stand with her against whatever comes." "Pretty words," Ezra said. "But words don't stop bullets or feed families or keep people from burning down everything I've built here." "Papa," Ezra held up a hand. "I'm not finished. He pointed at Tasunka. "You understand what you're asking, not just from her, but from me? This post is neutral ground, has been for 15 years. I've kept the peace by staying out of conflicts, by treating every man the same regardless of where he comes from. You think that continues when my daughter is married to a Lakota warrior?" "No," Tasunka said bluntly. "It doesn't. Some men will see it as betrayal, others as opportunity. Your position becomes more difficult." "Damn right it does." "But perhaps it also becomes more valuable." Tasunka leaned forward slightly. "You've built peace through neutrality. What if you could build it through connection instead? Through proving that different peoples can become family?" Ezra barked a harsh laugh. "You think the settlers care about proving anything except that this land belongs to them? You think the tribes are looking for more white influence in their lives?" "No," Tasunka admitted. "Most aren't. But some are looking for a way forward that doesn't end in blood. Some see that the old ways are dying, that the world is changing whether we want it to or not. Your daughter and I, we could be a bridge." "Or kindling," Ezra shot back. "Bridges can burn, son." The word son hung in the air between them. Not quite acceptance, but not rejection either. Clara seized the opening. "We know the risks, Papa. We talked about them all night. We're not children playing at romance. We understand what we're choosing." "Do you?" Ezra's voice turned gentle, which was somehow worse than his anger. Do you understand what it means when a white woman takes up with a native man? The names they'll call you? The doors that'll close? The danger? Yes. Do you understand that some settlements won't let you enter? That other women will cross the street to avoid you? That children will throw stones? Clara's throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. I understand. And you're willing to accept that, to trade your reputation, your safety, your place in the world for... He gestured helplessly at Tasunka. For this? For love, Clara corrected. For partnership. For a chance at something real instead of just safe. Ezra was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee cup. Your mother said something similar once, he murmured. Told me she'd rather have 1 year of truth than a lifetime of comfort. I thought she was being dramatic. His eyes went distant. Then I lost her, and I understood. Truth costs, but lies cost more. He looked at Tasunka again, his gaze sharp and assessing. You got family? People who depend on you? A sister, her husband, their children. My mother lives with them. They know about Clara? Not yet. I'll tell them when I return. And if they forbid it? Tasunka's expression hardened. I'm not a boy seeking permission. I'm a man making a choice. Even if that choice divides your people? I won't lie and say it won't cause difficulty. Some will see Clara as an outsider trying to take what isn't hers. Others will see me as weakened by white influence. Tasunka's voice remained steady. But my people also value courage. They respect those who face hard truths. When they see how Clara stands with me, when they see her strength, they'll understand. And if they don't, then we build our own path. Ezra studied them both for another long moment, then pushed back from the table with a heavy sigh. Here's what's going to happen, he said. He pointed at Tasunka. You go back to your people. You tell them the truth. You face whatever comes from that. And you come back in 1 month with their answer. Papa, that's not... Let me finish. Ezra's tone brooked no argument. 1 month gives you both time to be sure, gives your people time to adjust to the idea, gives me time to prepare for the storm that's coming. Because make no mistake, when word spreads that Clara Whitmore is promised to a Lakota warrior, there will be a storm. Clara wanted to argue, but she saw the wisdom in it. Rushing into marriage wouldn't make things easier. It would just add fuel to the fire. 1 month, Tasunka agreed. I'll return with my answer and my family's response. And if they refuse? Then I come anyway. His eyes found Clara's. I meant what I said. I'm not letting her go. Something in Ezra's expression softened slightly. Fair enough. But you hurt her, boy, and I don't care how many warriors you've got backing you. I'll find a way to make you regret it. If I hurt her, Tasunka said seriously, I'll deserve whatever you do. They shook hands across the table, a compact sealed in coffee and morning light. The month that followed tested Clara in ways she hadn't anticipated. Word spread faster than wildfire. Within a week, every trapper, rancher, and trader within 50 miles knew that Ezra Whitmore's daughter had taken up with a Lakota warrior. The responses ranged from curiosity to disgust to outright hostility. Old Tom Fletcher, who'd been trading at the post for years, refused to enter while Clara was inside. Don't want nothing to do with a woman who'd debase herself like that, he told Ezra, loud enough for Clara to hear through the open door. Martha Henriksen, the closest thing to a friend Clara had among the scattered settler women, came by ostensibly to trade for flour, but really to deliver a warning. I'm not judging you, Martha said, though her pinched expression suggested otherwise. But people are talking, saying terrible things. You need to end this before it destroys your father's business. My father supports my choice, Clara replied evenly. Does he? Or is he just trying to protect you from your own foolishness? Clara set down the flour sack with more force than necessary. I'm not foolish, Martha. I know exactly what I'm doing. Do you? Martha leaned across the counter, her voice dropping. Do you know what happens to white women who go to live with Indians? The degradation? The hardship? You'll be nothing to them, just another captive to do their bidding. Anger flared hot in Clara's chest. Tasunka isn't capturing me. We're choosing each other. That's what you think now. But once you're in their camp, once you're away from civilization... Martha shook her head. Mark my words, Clara. This ends badly. And when it does, don't expect sympathy from those of us who warned you." She left without buying the flower. Clara stood behind the counter, hands shaking with rage and hurt, and wondered if this was just the beginning. It was. Over the following weeks, the isolation grew more pronounced. Customers who'd been friendly turned cold. Women who'd once chatted with her while shopping now conducted their business in terse monosyllables. Children stared and whispered. The worst came from Reverend Carlyle, who made a special trip from the settlement 20 miles south just to save Clara's soul. "You're walking into darkness, child," he intoned, his voice booming through the trading post. "Consorting with heathens, abandoning your people, spitting on everything decent and holy." "I'm in love," Clara said quietly. "Love?" Carlyle's face purpled. "This isn't love. It's lust and sin and the devil's own temptation. That savage has bewitched you, turned you from the path of righteousness." "That savage," Clara said, her voice dropping to something dangerous, "has shown me more respect and genuine care in 3 days than most white men have shown in my entire life." "Respect? He's using you. They all use white women. Take them, ruin them, discard them when they're done. You think you're special? You think he won't tire of you the moment something younger comes along?" Clara walked around the counter slowly, deliberately. She was taller than the Reverend, and she used every inch of it. "Get out," she said softly. "Now you listen here. Get out." Each word fell like a stone. "This is my father's trading post, and you're not welcome here. Take your judgment and your ignorance and leave." Carlyle sputtered, his face going from purple to crimson. "Your father will hear about this. The whole territory will hear about this. You're damned, girl. Damned." "Then I'll see you in hell, Reverend." He left in a storm of righteous fury, and Clara stood in the empty store shaking, not with fear, but with the sheer force of emotions she'd kept bottled up for weeks. Ezra emerged from the back room where he'd been pretending not to listen. "That was well done," he said quietly. "Was it?" Clara's voice cracked. "Because it feels like I just made everything worse." "Maybe. Or maybe you just drew the lines clear." Ezra crossed to her, pulled her into a rough hug. "People like Carlyle, they don't want conversation. They want submission. You gave them your answer. What if everyone feels like him? What if the whole territory turns against us? Then we adapt. We always have." Ezra pulled back, gripped her shoulders. "But hear me, girl. If this gets too dangerous, if keeping you safe means ending this, I'll do it. I lost your mother. I won't lose you too." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice, but in her heart she knew she couldn't walk away from Tasunka, even if the whole world stood against them. The month crept toward its end with agonizing slowness. Clara threw herself into work, helping her father expand the store's inventory, repairing the corral fence, hunting to supplement their supplies. Anything to keep her hands and mind busy. But at night, lying in her narrow bed, she thought of Tasunka constantly. Wondered how his people had received the news. Wondered if he was fighting his own battles, facing his own version of Reverend Carlyle and Martha Henriksen. Wondered if he'd come back. The doubt crept in during the darkest hours, a quiet voice whispering that maybe he'd realized the cost was too high, that maybe his family's disapproval would change his mind, that maybe she'd given her heart to a man who'd decide she wasn't worth the trouble. She hated that voice, but she couldn't silence it completely. On the 28th day, a late spring storm rolled in, dumping snow and sleet across the territory. Clara stood at the window watching the gray sheets of precipitation, her chest tight with worry. "He won't come in this weather," Ezra said from behind her. "He said 1 month. He also said he's practical, no sense riding through a blizzard just to meet a deadline." Clara pressed her forehead against the cold glass. "What if he doesn't come at all?" "Then you'll know he wasn't the man you thought he was." Ezra's voice was gentle. "But I don't think that's going to happen." "How can you be sure?" "Because I saw the way he looked at you, same way I looked at your mother." Ezra joined her at the window. "That's not something a man walks away from easily." The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of howling wind, blinding snow, and paralyzing cold. Clara paced the trading post like a caged wolf, unable to settle, unable to focus on anything but the blank white world outside. On the 4th day, the storm broke. Clara woke to brilliant sunshine reflecting off snow so white it hurt to look at. She dressed quickly, ignoring the cold that made her breath fog, and hurried downstairs. Ezra was already at the window, coffee in hand. "He's here," he said simply. Clara's heart leaped into her throat. She rushed to the door, flung it open, and there, emerging from the tree line with 2 horses, was Tasunka. He looked thinner, harder, like the month had carved away something soft and left only essential strength. Snow clung to his hair and shoulders, and his face was set in grim determination. But when he saw her standing in the doorway, everything in his expression transformed. Clara ran. She didn't care about the snow, the cold, the impropriety. She ran across the frozen ground and crashed into him with enough force to make him stagger. Tasunka caught her, lifted her, buried his face in her hair. "You came," she gasped against his neck. "I said I would." "The storm, I thought, I know." He set her down gently, framed her face with both hands. "I know, but I'm here, and I'm not leaving without you." Clara kissed him hard, pouring a month of doubt and fear and longing into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she saw Ezra standing on the porch watching them. "Come inside," Ezra called. "You look half frozen." They walked to the trading post together, Tasunka's arm around Clara's shoulders, her hand fisted in his shirt like she was afraid he'd disappear if she let go. Inside, Ezra had already poured a 3rd cup of coffee. They settled at the table, the same positions as a month ago, but everything felt different now. Tested, proven. "So," Ezra said, "what's the verdict from your people?" Tasunka's jaw tightened. "Mixed. My mother is not pleased. She fears I'm abandoning our ways, that I'm being seduced by white promises. My sister worries about the practical dangers, that Clara will be targeted by those who hate our people, or that I'll be seen as weak. And the rest of the tribe? Some agree with my mother and sister. Others are curious. A few see it as I do, a chance to build something new." Tasunka met Ezra's gaze squarely. But the council made their position clear. If I marry Clara, she must live as one of us. Learn our language, our customs, our ways. Prove her commitment isn't just words. Clara's stomach clenched. "Live with your people? Leave the trading post?" "For a time, yes. Perhaps a year, maybe more." Tasunka turned to her, his expression serious. "I won't lie to you, Clara. It will be hard. My people will test you. Some will be welcoming, but others will look for any excuse to prove you don't belong. You'll have to work harder than anyone, prove yourself more than anyone, just to earn basic respect. And if I can't? If I fail their tests? Then we leave together and build our own way." His hand found hers across the table. "But I believe you can do this. I've seen your strength." Clara's mind raced. Leave the trading post? Leave her father? Live among people who already half distrusted her? But then she looked at Tasunka's face, the absolute certainty there, the unwavering faith, and she knew her answer had never really been in doubt. "When do we leave?" she asked. Ezra made a choked sound. "Clara." "I'm going, Papa." She turned to him, saw the pain in his eyes. "I have to. You know I do." "I know," Ezra said roughly. "Doesn't mean I have to like it." He stood abruptly, paced to the window, stared out at the snow-covered landscape. "How long?" "A year," Tasunka said. "Maybe longer, but she can visit, and you're welcome in our camp." "A white trader in a Lakota camp, that'll go well." "You're not just a white trader, you'll be family." Tasunka's voice carried absolute conviction. "My family. Under our law, that means something. It means protection, obligation, respect." Ezra turned back, his eyes wet. "You take care of her. You hear me? You protect her like she's your own breath." "I will, I swear it." "And you," Ezra looked at Clara, "you write when you can. Send word that you're alive. Don't let me spend every night wondering if I've lost you the way I lost your mother." Clara crossed to him, wrapped her arms around his solid frame. "I promise, Papa. I promise." They held each other for a long moment, and Clara felt the weight of everything changing, childhood ending, new life beginning, the terrifying exhilaration of stepping off the edge of the known world. When they finally pulled apart, Ezra wiped his eyes roughly. "When are you leaving?" 3 days, Tasunka said. "Clara needs time to prepare, to gather what she wants to bring, and we need supplies for the journey." What kind of supplies? Warm clothes, blankets, tools, anything she might need to build a life. Ezra nodded slowly. Then we better get to work. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and emotion. Clara sorted through her belongings, deciding what to take and what to leave behind. Her warmest dresses, her mother's sewing kit, a few precious books, the essentials of a life packed into 2 leather bags that could fit on a horse. Ezra worked quietly alongside them, saying little but doing much. He made sure Clara had the best winter coat, the warmest blankets, supplies that would last months. When she protested that it was too much, he simply said, "Let me do this. It's all I can do." On the final night, Ezra cooked a proper meal: venison stew, fresh bread, dried apple pie. They ate together at the table, the 3 of them, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. After dinner, Ezra pulled out a small wooden box Clara had never seen before. "Your mother's," he said quietly, setting it in front of her. "I've been saving it for when you were ready. Figured this counts." Clara opened the box with trembling hands. Inside lay a delicate beaded necklace, clearly native-made, along with a folded letter. "She made the necklace herself," Ezra explained. "Combined Cree patterns with French techniques. Took her months. She wore it on our wedding day." His voice went rough. "The letter is for you. She wrote it when she knew she was dying." Clara's vision blurred with tears. "Papa, read it later, when you need her words." He closed his hand over hers. "But wear the necklace. Let it remind you that you're not the first to walk this path, and that love, real love, is always worth the cost." Clara clutched the box to her chest, unable to speak. That night, lying in her bed for the last time, she unfolded the letter by candlelight. "My darling daughter," it began in shaky handwriting. "If you're reading this, I am gone, but you remain. I wish I could be there to guide you, to watch you grow, to see what kind of woman you become. But life is cruel in its timing, and I must leave these words instead. Know this, you are loved. Your father will struggle to show it. He's a practical man in an impractical situation, but he loves you with a fierceness that terrifies him. Be patient with him. He's doing his best. Know also that you come from strength. My mother was Cree, my father French. They loved across a divide that should have been impossible. Your father and I did the same. If you carry even half our courage, you will move mountains. The world will tell you to be small, to stay safe, to accept the boundaries others draw around your life. Do not listen. Be large. Be brave. Be impossible. And if you find love, real love, the kind that sees you wholly, hold on to it with both hands. Let it transform you. Let it cost you everything if it must. Because that kind of love is worth more than safety, more than comfort, more than the approval of people too afraid to truly live. I love you, my daughter. I will always love you. Even from beyond death, I am with you. Be brave, be true, be free." Your mother Clara read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face, then carefully folded it and placed it back in the box with the necklace. She understood now. Her mother hadn't died because she chose love. She died because life was hard, and medical care was scarce, and the frontier took as much as it gave. But she'd lived first, really lived, and Clara was her daughter. Morning came cold and clear, the kind of brilliant spring day that made the whole world feel washed clean. Clara dressed in her warmest traveling clothes, braided her hair, and fastened her mother's necklace around her throat. When she came downstairs, Tasunka was waiting with the horses packed and ready. Ezra stood beside him, his face set in grim acceptance. "You sure about this?" Ezra asked one final time. "I'm sure." He nodded slowly, then pulled her into a crushing hug. "Then go. Live. Be happy. And come back to visit or I'll track you down myself." Clara laughed through her tears. "I will, Papa, I promise." Ezra released her, turned to Tasunka. "You take care of what's mine. I will guard her with my life." They shook hands, a promise sealed. Clara mounted her horse, settled into the saddle, took one last look at the trading post that had been her entire world. Then she turned her face north, toward Tasunka, toward uncertainty, toward the future she'd chosen. And together, they rode into the brilliant morning. The journey north took 5 days through country that grew wilder with each mile. Clara had ridden most of her life, but never like this. Long hours in the saddle, sleeping under stars, eating dried meat and journey bread, every sense alert to the vast landscape around them. Tasunka rode beside her, patient and watchful, pointing out landmarks and teaching her words in his language. Mani for water, fejuta for grass, angpetuwashte for beautiful day. She practiced the unfamiliar sounds, stumbling over the nasal consonants and tonal shifts, making him smile when she got it particularly wrong. "You sound like you're choking on stones," he said on the third day. "Your language sounds like you're singing and growling at the same time." "That's because we are." He looked at her with something warm in his eyes. "You'll learn. You're stubborn enough." "Is that supposed to be a compliment? Among my people?" "Yes. Stubbornness keeps you alive." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythm of hoofbeats and creaking leather settling into Clara's bones. The land here rolled in endless waves, covered in new spring grass that rippled like water in the wind. She'd never been this far from the trading post, never seen the world stretch quite so endlessly in all directions. It should have frightened her. Instead, she felt something like exhilaration. "Tell me about your family," Clara said eventually, "so I know what I'm walking into." Tasunka considered the question carefully. "My mother is Wichapi Gleshka, Spotted Star. She's strong, traditional, protective of our ways. She lost my father to settlers' guns 10 years ago. Since then, she's been careful about white influence." "She's going to hate me." "She's going to test you," he corrected. "There's a difference. If she hated you, she would have told the council to forbid this marriage. Instead, she demanded you prove yourself worthy. That means she's willing to be convinced." Clara wasn't sure that made her feel better. "And your sister?" "Tashina Washte. Good blanket. She's practical, fierce, married to a good hunter named Changte Washtela. They have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Tashina will watch you closely, look for any sign you're using me or treating this as a game." "I'm not." "I know. But you'll have to prove it to her." Tasunka glanced at Clara, his expression serious. "My people have been hurt by white promises before. Treaties broken, land stolen, families destroyed. When you enter our camp, you carry the weight of that history whether you want to or not." The magnitude of what she was attempting settled over Clara like a physical weight. "What if I can't do this? What if I try my hardest and they still reject me?" "Then we leave together and build our own path." His voice carried absolute certainty. "But I don't think that will happen. You have something my people value more than heritage." "What's that?" "Courage. Real courage. Not the kind that comes from having nothing to lose. The courage that comes from risking everything because something matters more than safety." He reached across the space between their horses and caught her hand. "That's the kind of courage that earns respect." Clara held tight to his hand, drawing strength from the solid warmth of it. On the evening of the 5th day, they crested a long rise and looked down into a river valley where dozens of lodges stood in careful arrangement. Smoke rose from cook fires, horses grazed in massive herds, children's voices carried on the wind. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "That's home," Tasunka said quietly. It looked both smaller and larger than she'd imagined. A community of perhaps 200 people, living in the old ways, moving with the seasons and the buffalo herds. For a moment, the sheer foreignness of it overwhelmed her. Then she felt Tasunka's hand on her shoulder, steady and sure. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but let's go anyway." They rode down into the valley as the sun painted everything gold and crimson. People emerged from lodges to watch their approach. Men, women, children, all stopping their evening tasks to stare at the Lakota warrior returning with a white woman at his side. Clara felt the weight of 100 gazes, curious and skeptical and hostile all at once. She kept her spine straight, her chin up, everything her father had taught her about facing difficult customers. Show no fear, offer respect, stand your ground. Tasunka led them to a large lodge near the center of the camp. An older woman emerged, her face lined with age and grief and wisdom. She wore her hair in 2 long braids threaded with silver, and her eyes, the same dark intensity as Tasunka's, fixed on Clara with laser focus. Wichapi Gleshka, Spotted Star, Tasunka's mother. Tasunka dismounted smoothly and spoke in rapid Lakota, gestures indicating Clara. His mother listened without expression, then responded in a voice that carried clear across the gathered crowd. Clara didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Challenge. Tasunka turned to Clara, helped her down from her horse. My mother welcomes you to our camp. She says you may stay in my sister's lodge while the council decides if you're worthy to join our people. What did she really say? Clara asked quietly. A slight smile touched his mouth. She said you look soft and unprepared, and she gives you 1 month before you run back to your father crying. Tell her I've never run from anything in my life, and I don't plan to start now. Tasunka's smile widened. He spoke again in Lakota, translating Clara's words. Wichachbigleshka's eyes narrowed, but Clara thought she saw a glimmer of something that might have been approval quickly suppressed. Another woman approached, younger, perhaps 30, with a strong build and watchful eyes. She carried a baby on her hip and had 2 young boys clinging to her skirts. My sister, Tashina Washte, Tasunka introduced. Good blanket. Tashina looked Clara up and down with frank assessment, then said something in Lakota. She says you'll sleep in her lodge, help with her children and household tasks, and learn our ways, Tasunka translated. She also says if you break my heart, she'll personally ensure you regret it. Clara met Tashina's hard stare directly. Tell her I have no intention of breaking anyone's heart. I'm here to build a life, not destroy one, Tasunka translated. Tashina's expression didn't soften, but she nodded once and gestured for Clara to follow. Tasunka caught Clara's hand before she could move. I'll be close. My lodge is just there. He pointed to a dwelling 20 paces away. If you need anything, I'll be fine, Clara said with more confidence than she felt. He searched her face, then pulled her close and kissed her forehead. You're the bravest person I know. Then he released her, and Clara followed Tashina into a world she didn't understand. The lodge was surprisingly spacious inside, with a fire pit in the center and sleeping platforms arranged around the edges. The air smelled of smoke, leather, and something herbal Clara couldn't identify. Tashina's husband, a lean man with kind eyes, nodded greeting but didn't speak. Tashina gestured to a pile of buffalo robes in the corner, clearly indicating where Clara should sleep. Then she handed her the baby without ceremony and began preparing the evening meal. The baby, a girl perhaps 8 months old, stared at Clara with huge dark eyes, clearly uncertain about this strange, pale woman. Clara held her carefully, the small weight both foreign and familiar. She'd helped care for trappers' children at the trading post, but this was different. This child was studying her with the same intense focus her mother had. Hello? Clara said softly. I'm Clara. I know I look different, but I'm not going to hurt you. The baby's lower lip trembled. Oh no, please don't cry. Your mother already thinks I'm useless. If I can't even hold you without making you scream... The baby's face crumpled. Clara stood quickly, rocking gently the way she'd seen mothers do. It's all right. You're all right. Look, see? I'm just strange looking, that's all. Strange, but harmless. To her immense relief, the baby's expression shifted from impending wail to curious uncertainty. One of the boys, perhaps 5 years old, approached cautiously and poked Clara's skirt. Wasichu, he said solemnly. Clara didn't need translation for that word. She'd heard it enough. White person. Outsider. Yes, she agreed. Wasichu. But I'm learning. Can you teach me? The boy tilted his head, clearly not understanding her words but catching her tone. He said something in Lakota, pointing at the baby. I'm sorry, I don't understand yet, Clara said. But I will. I promise I will. Tashina spoke sharply from across the fire, and the boy scurried back to his brother. She ladled something that looked like stew into wooden bowls and distributed them efficiently. Husband first, boy second, then herself, and finally Clara. Clara accepted the bowl with a nod of thanks and sat where Tashina indicated. The stew was unfamiliar, gamey meat, wild roots, flavors she couldn't identify. But it was warm and filling, and she ate it without complaint. After the meal, Tashina demonstrated through gestures what Clara's tasks would be: hauling water from the river, gathering firewood, tending the fire, preparing hides, watching the children. The list seemed endless, and Clara's heart sank as she realized how much she didn't know. But she nodded at each instruction, committing it to memory, determined to prove she could learn. That first night in the lodge, Clara lay on the buffalo robes, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the camp settling into sleep. Children's murmurs, adults' low conversations, horses shifting, somewhere in the distance a song that made her chest ache with its beauty. Through the lodge wall she could hear Tasunka's voice in his own dwelling, speaking with someone. His mother maybe, or friends. The Lakota words flowed like water, musical and completely incomprehensible. Clara touched her mother's necklace, drawing strength from it. Be brave. Be true. Be free. She could do this. She would do this, even if it killed her. The next morning began before dawn when Tashina shook her awake and thrust a leather water bag into her hands. The other women were already heading toward the river, and Clara understood she was expected to follow. She stumbled after them in the gray pre-dawn light, her body stiff from sleeping on the ground. The women, perhaps a dozen of them, moved with practiced efficiency, filling bags from the river, laughing and talking in rapid Lakota. They all stopped talking when Clara approached. The silence felt heavy, judgmental. Clara kept her expression neutral as she knelt by the river and filled her water bag. The water was shockingly cold, and her fingers went numb almost immediately. One of the younger women said something that made the others laugh. Clara didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone well enough. Mockery. She gritted her teeth and finished filling her bag. When she stood to leave, an older woman, perhaps 50, with gray streaking her braids, stepped into her path and spoke in heavily accented but clear English. You waste Tasunka's time. Go home, white girl. You don't belong here. Clara met her gaze steadily. I belong wherever Tasunka is, and I'm not leaving. You think you love him, but you don't understand what love means to our people. Love is work, sacrifice, endurance. You whites love only when it's easy. Then I'll prove you wrong. The woman's eyes narrowed. We'll see. Winter comes. Then we see if you still here. She moved aside and Clara walked back to the lodge with her water, back straight, refusing to show how badly her hands shook. The days that followed blurred into a relentless cycle of work and learning and failing and trying again. Clara hauled water until her shoulders screamed. She gathered firewood until her hands bled. She watched Tashina prepare hides and tried to copy her technique, producing work so sloppy that Tashina threw it back at her with a disgusted sound. The children watched her with open curiosity, sometimes helping, sometimes laughing at her mistakes. The baby, Zingtkala Luta, Red Bird, gradually warmed to her, eventually reaching for Clara instead of fussing when handed over. Tashina's husband, Changtewashtela, was the first to show her real kindness. He spoke a little English, learned from traders, and used it to quietly correct her mistakes. Water bag, you carry like this, he demonstrated, showing her how to balance the weight. Save your back. Thank you, Clara said gratefully. He nodded. You try hard. Is good. My wife, she watch. She see. Does she hate me? Changtewashtela considered the question. She not hate, she protect. Her brother, he her heart. She make sure you not hurt him. I won't. I know. I see how you look at him, same way he look at you. A small smile crossed his face. Like you both crazy. Clara laughed despite herself. Maybe we are. Good crazy. Not bad crazy. It was the first real conversation she'd had with anyone besides Tasunka in over a week, and it nearly made her cry. She saw Tasunka only in passing during those first weeks. He was busy with his own responsibilities, hunting, council meetings, teaching younger men warrior skills. But whenever their eyes met across the camp, the connection hit her like lightning. Some nights he would come to Tashina's lodge after the children slept, and they would sit by the fire speaking in low voices. Tashina pretended not to listen, but Clara saw her watching, assessing. How are you managing? Tasunka asked on the 10th night, his hand finding hers in the shadows. I'm terrible at everything, Clara admitted. I can't tan hides worth a damn, I barely understand 10 words of Lakota, and half the women won't even look at me. The other half? Tolerate my presence. Barely. Tasunka's thumb traced circles on her palm. It will get easier. Will it? Or are you just saying that to make me feel better? Both. He pulled her closer. But Clara, you've been in here less than 2 weeks. Give it time. How much time before your mother decides I'm hopeless? My mother is watching to see if you give up. As long as you keep trying, you're proving something. What if trying isn't enough? Tasunka cupped her face gently. Then we leave together. I told you, you're not alone in this. Clara leaned into his touch, drawing strength from it. I miss you. I miss being able to just talk to you without an audience. I know. I miss you too. His voice dropped lower. But soon. Once the council approves our marriage, we'll have our own lodge, our own life. When will they decide? Another week, maybe 2. They're watching you, watching how you adapt. Every task you complete, every word you learn, every day you don't run, it all matters. Clara nodded, determination hardening in her chest. Then I'll give them something worth watching. The next morning, she woke before Tashina and started the fire herself. It took her 3 tries and most of her patience, but she got it lit. Then she hauled water without being asked, brought back twice as much firewood as usual, and spent the afternoon watching the older women prepare hides so she could learn their technique. One of them, the gray-haired woman who'd confronted her at the river, noticed her intense observation and barked something in Lakota. Clara didn't understand, but the woman gestured sharply. Come here. Heart-pounding, Clara approached. The woman thrust a scraping tool at her and demonstrated the proper motion for removing fat from a hide. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, the scraper gliding smoothly across the skin. Then she stepped back and pointed at Clara. Try. Clara tried. She was clumsy, her angle wrong, her pressure inconsistent. The woman watched with pursed lips, then physically adjusted Clara's grip and stance. Like this, she said in English, guiding Clara's hands through the motion. Feel the hide. It tell you what it need. Clara focused all her attention on the sensation of the scraper against leather, the resistance and give, the way her body needed to move to make it work. After 20 minutes of concentrated effort, the woman made a non-committal sound and nodded once. Not praise, but not rejection either. Clara worked until her arms trembled with exhaustion, until every muscle screamed. When she finally returned to Tashina's lodge, she found Tasunka's mother waiting. Wichapi stood by the fire, her expression unreadable. She spoke in Lakota, her voice carrying authority. Tashina emerged from the lodge and translated, her tone careful. My mother says you are learning, slowly, but learning. She says tomorrow you will come to her lodge. She will teach you to cook our food properly. If you want to be Lakota, you must feed Lakota family. Clara's heart leaped. This was a test, but it was also an opportunity. Tell her I'm grateful for her teaching. I'll work hard. Tashina relayed the message. Wichapi studied Clara for a long moment, then said something else. She says don't thank her yet. She is hard teacher. Many white women would cry and give up. Clara met the older woman's gaze directly. I'm not many white women. Wichapi expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. She turned and walked away without another word. Tashina watched her go, then turned to Clara with the first hint of warmth she'd shown. You did good today. The women, they talk about you tonight. Say maybe you not so useless. That's the best compliment I've gotten in weeks, Clara said wryly. Is high praise from them. Tashina almost smiled. Tomorrow, you learn from my mother. She teach good, but hard. If you survive her lessons, you survive anything. That night, Clara lay on her buffalo robes feeling every bruise and blister, every strained muscle. Her hands were raw, her back ached, and she was pretty sure she'd never been this exhausted in her life. But something had shifted. She could feel it. She was no longer just the white woman who didn't belong. She was the white woman who was trying. And in a culture that valued endurance above almost everything else, that mattered. The next morning, Clara presented herself at Wichapi lodge as instructed. Tasunka's mother was already working, grinding dried corn into meal with practiced efficiency. She looked up when Clara entered, gestured to a pile of roots that needed cleaning. For the next several hours, Wichapi taught without words, demonstrating, correcting, occasionally grunting approval when Clara got something right. They prepared prairie turnips, wild onions, and dried berries, creating a stew that filled the lodge with rich aromas. Clara's hands moved automatically following the older woman's lead, and slowly she began to understand the rhythm of the work. Not just the mechanics, but the meaning behind it, the care taken, the skill required, the pride in feeding family well. When the stew was finally done, Wichapi ladled out a bowl and handed it to Clara. Eat, she said in English, the first English word Clara had heard from her. Clara tasted it carefully. The flavors were complex, earthy, slightly sweet, with an undertone of smoke. "It's good," she said honestly. "You made it," Wichapi Gleshka replied. "Now you know how to feed Tasunka, how to feed his children when they come." The words hung in the air, not quite acceptance, but acknowledgement. Recognition that Clara might actually have a future here. "Thank you," Clara said, her voice thick, "for teaching me." Wichapi Gleshka studied her with those penetrating eyes. "You love my son?" "Yes, more than anything." "Why?" Clara considered the question carefully. "Because he sees me, really sees me, not just what he wants me to be. Because he's brave and honest and kind. Because when I'm with him, I feel like I can be my whole self instead of just the parts that are acceptable." Wichapi Gleshka was quiet for a long moment. His father, he was like that. See people truly. It made him strong leader, also made him vulnerable. He trust wrong person, and that person betray him to settlers. Her voice went hard. They shot him like animal, left him to die slow. Clara's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." "Sorry don't bring him back. Sorry don't erase what your people did." The older woman's eyes bored into Clara's. "I tell you this so you understand. When I see you with Tasunka, I see danger. Not because of who you are, but because of what you represent. Your people kill mine, take our land, break promises. Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," Clara said quietly. "Not yet. I have to earn that trust, but I'm willing to spend my whole life earning it if that's what it takes." Pretty words. True words. Clara set down her bowl and met Wichapi Gleshka's gaze directly. "I know I can't change the past. I can't undo what's been done. But I can choose my future, and I choose Tasunka. I choose this life. I choose to be worthy of the trust you might one day give me." Wichapi Gleshka studied her for a long time, and Clara forced herself to hold that penetrating stare without flinching. Finally, the older woman nodded slowly. "We see. Time show truth. Words easy, life hard. I'm ready for hard. You think you ready. But winter come, baby come, hunger come, loss come. Then we see." Clara understood the challenge beneath the words. This wasn't acceptance. It was a warning. But it was also the first real conversation they'd had, and that felt like progress. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Clara worked from dawn until long after dark, hauling, gathering, preparing, learning. Her hands grew calloused, her body stronger. She picked up Lakota words and phrases, began to understand the rhythm of camp life, learned to read the subtle signals that governed social interaction. She made mistakes constantly, insulted someone by accident, used the wrong word and made the children laugh, prepared food incorrectly and had to start over. But she kept trying, kept learning, kept showing up. And slowly, grudgingly, the camp began to accept her presence. The gray-haired woman who'd first challenged her, Wingyang Washteshni, which Tasunka translated as not-so-good woman, though he said it was more complicated than that, began teaching her hide work in earnest. Other women stopped pointedly ignoring her. Children started including her in their games, delighted by her terrible pronunciation of their language. Tashina thawed incrementally, offering corrections that felt more like guidance than criticism. Her boys began calling Clara Tashina Gleshka, spotted blanket, because of her freckles, and the nickname stuck. Even Wichapi Gleshka softened slightly, though she remained exacting in her standards. But when Clara successfully tanned her first hide without help, the older woman nodded with something that might have been approval and said, "Better. Still not good, but better." Coming from her, it felt like high praise. Through it all, Tasunka remained a constant presence, not interfering, but supporting, catching her eye across the camp and smiling, sitting with her in the evenings and translating conversations so she could understand the community's rhythms, teaching her the stories and history that gave context to everything she was learning. "The council meets tomorrow," he told her one evening as they sat by the river, stealing a moment of privacy. "They'll make their decision about our marriage." Clara's stomach clenched. "And if they say no, then we leave and build our own path. I've told you, I'm not giving you up." "But you'd lose your family, your people." "I'd lose one way of being with my people, but I'd gain you. That's a trade I'm willing to make. His arm tightened around her shoulders. But I don't think it will come to that. You've impressed them, Clara. Even my mother admits you're stronger than she expected. She told you that? She told Tashina, who told her husband, who told me. Tasunka smiled. Information travels in circles here. Clara leaned into his warmth, watching the sunset paint the river gold. I've never worked so hard in my life, or been so tired, or so scared of failing. But you haven't failed. Not yet. You won't. His voice carried absolute certainty. You're too stubborn to fail. Is that why you love me? My stubbornness? That's one reason. He turned her face toward his eyes serious. I love you because you chose the hard path when you could have chosen safety. Because you face every challenge without complaint. Because you're becoming part of this community in a way that feels real, not performed. And because when I look at you, I see my future, the woman who'll stand beside me, raise children with me, build a life worth living. Clara kissed him softly, pouring everything she couldn't say into that connection. When they pulled apart, she whispered, whatever the council decides, I'm yours, now and always. And I'm yours. The council will just make it official. They sat by the river until the stars emerged, two people balanced on the edge of everything, waiting for the world to decide their fate. The council fire burned bright against the night sky when Clara was summoned. She'd spent the day in a state of restless anticipation, her hands shaking as she worked, her mind unable to settle on anything but what was coming. Tashina had braided Clara's hair in the traditional way, weaving in small pieces of quill work that marked her as a woman seeking to join the tribe. The careful attention felt like both blessing and test, making Clara presentable while also highlighting how much rode on the council's decision. You look like one of us now, Tashina said quietly as she finished. Almost. Almost, Clara echoed. My mother, she will speak for you. This is good sign. Clara's breath caught. She will? She tell council you work hard, learn fast, show respect. Not full approval, but not rejection either. Tashina met her eyes in the polished metal mirror. In our way, this means something. Means she see possibility. Thank you, Clara whispered. For everything. For letting me stay in your lodge, for teaching me, for not giving up on me, even when I was hopeless. Tashina's expression softened in a way Clara had never seen before. You're not hopeless, stubborn, yes, clumsy, yes, but not hopeless. You have heart of Lakota woman, even if body is white. Heart matters more. The words settled into Clara's chest like stones in still water, precious, weighted with meaning. When full darkness fell, Tasunka came to escort her to the council lodge. He wore his ceremonial clothes, beautifully quilled shirt, hair adorned with eagle feathers, and the sight of him took her breath away. Ready? He asked. No, but let's go anyway. His hand found hers, squeezed once. Remember, you've already proven yourself to the people who matter most. This is just making it official. The council lodge stood at the center of the camp, larger than the others, its fire burning bright enough to be seen from every dwelling. Clara could make out silhouettes inside, the elders who would decide her fate, her future, everything. Tasunka led her inside, and the wave of attention hit her like a physical force. 12 elders sat in a circle around the fire, men and women both, their faces carved by time and weather and hard decisions. Witch Happy Gleshka sat among them, her expression neutral but her eyes tracking Clara's every movement. Tasunka guided Clara to stand beside him, facing the council. He spoke in Lakota, his voice carrying formal weight, and though Clara couldn't understand every word, she caught her own name in his, heard the respect in his tone. One of the elder men, gray-braided and eagle-eyed, responded, his voice gravelly with age. The exchange went back and forth, questions and answers, the rhythm of negotiation Clara recognized even without understanding the language. Finally, the elder turned his attention to Clara and spoke in careful English. I am Tatanka Ska, White Buffalo Bull. I speak for council. His eyes were sharp despite his age. You come here as outsider. Want to marry Tasunka Red Elk. Want to become Lakota. This is big thing, not simple thing. I understand, Clara said, keeping her voice steady. You understand? White Buffalo Bull leaned forward. You understand that Lakota woman is not white woman? That our ways are hard, our expectations high? That you give up your old life completely? I understand that I'm asking to join a people I wasn't born to, that I'll have to work harder than anyone to prove I belong, that it won't be easy. Clara met his gaze directly. But I'm not afraid of hard work, and I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for the chance to build a life with the man I love, among people I've come to respect. White Buffalo Bull translated for the others. Several nodded. Others looked skeptical. Another elder, a woman with silver hair and knowing eyes, spoke up. Tasunka translated quietly for Clara. Wingyang na Checha, trembling woman, asks what skills you bring, what value you add to our community beyond being Tasunka's wife. Clara took a breath, organizing her thoughts. I can read and write in English. I can help negotiate trades with settlers and trappers. I know how to run a trading post, keep accounts, assess quality of goods. I'm learning hide work, cooking, language, and I'll keep learning until I'm useful. The translation sparked conversation among the elders. Some seemed intrigued. Others remained unmoved. A younger elder, perhaps 40, spoke with intensity. Tasunka's jaw tightened as he translated. Wangbli Kingiela, soaring eagle, says your people have broken every treaty, stolen land, killed our families. He asks why we should trust you when your people proved themselves untrustworthy. This was the heart of it. The question Clara had been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. You shouldn't trust me, she said clearly. Not yet. Trust is earned, not given. And I can't answer for what other white people have done. I can only answer for myself. She paused, choosing her words carefully. My mother was Métis, Cree and French. She died because the white doctor wouldn't come to help a mixed-race woman. My father loved her anyway, built a life with her anyway, even knowing the cost. He taught me that people matter more than politics, that honor matters more than heritage, that what you do matters more than where you come from. Clara looked around the circle, meeting each elder's eyes. I can't change the past. I can't undo the broken treaties or bring back the dead, but I can choose my future. And I choose to stand with Tasunka, to learn your ways, to raise children who bridge both worlds, to prove through action, not words, that some white people can be trusted, that some alliances can hold. The silence that followed felt heavy as a mountain's. Then Wichapi Gleshka spoke, her voice carrying authority. She addressed the council in Lakota, gesturing occasionally toward Clara. The speech went on for several minutes, and Clara watched the other elders' faces shift and change as they listened. When Tasunka's mother finished, White Buffalo Bull nodded slowly and turned back to Clara. Wichapi Gleshka says you work hard these weeks. Learn fast, show respect, help with children, with hides, with cooking. She say you not perfect, but you try with full heart. She say her son choose well, you have strength to be Lakota wife. Clara's eyes burned with sudden tears. She looked at Wichapi Gleshka, who gave the slightest nod. Not warmth exactly, but acknowledgement, recognition. White Buffalo Bull consulted quietly with the other elders. The discussion lasted long enough that Clara's legs began to ache from standing, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone must hear it. Finally, the elder raised his hand for silence. Council decides, he announced. You may marry Tasunka Red Elk. You may join our people, but with conditions. Clara's breath caught. What conditions? 1. You live as Lakota woman for 1 full year. Learn language, learn customs, learn our ways completely. No running to white settlements when things get hard. I agree. 2. If children come, they are raised Lakota first. They learn our language, our stories, our ways before learning white ways. Clara glanced at Tasunka, who nodded slightly. I agree. 3. You use your skills to help our people. Your reading, your writing, your knowledge of trading, these things serve community, not just yourself. I agree. White Buffalo Bull's expression softened very slightly. Then council approves this marriage. In 3 days we hold ceremony. You and Tasunka Red Elk join as husband and wife under our law. The formal words seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Then Tasunka pulled Clara close, and the council members began speaking among themselves, the tension breaking like clouds after a storm. You did it, Tasunka murmured against her hair. You're going to be my wife. Clara held him tight, overwhelmed by relief and joy and the magnitude of what she'd just committed to. I can't believe they said yes. I told you, you impressed them. He pulled back to look at her face, his eyes shining. 3 days from now, you're mine. Officially, completely, irrevocably. I was already yours, I know, but now everyone else knows it too. They walked out of the council lodge into the cool night air, and Clara felt the weight of watching eyes from every direction. Word would spread quickly. The white woman had been approved. The marriage would happen. Some would celebrate, others would judge. But it no longer mattered what they thought. She'd earned her place. The next 3 days blurred into frantic preparation. Tashina and Wichapi Gleshka took charge of readying Clara for the ceremony, teaching her the traditions and expectations, helping her prepare gifts to exchange. Lakota marriage is not like white marriage, Wichapi Gleshka explained as they worked on beading a ceremonial dress. It's about joining families, not just two people. About commitment to community, to future generations. What will I need to do? Exchange gifts with Tasunka's family. Speak vows before people. Move into his lodge as wife. The older woman's hands moved deftly through the beadwork. But most important, show you understand what it means to be partner, not just pretty woman he takes to bed. Clara flushed, but held her ground. I understand. You think you do. But marriage is long. Passion fades. What remains is partnership, working together, supporting together, building together. This is what lasts. My father told me something similar. He said my mother knew love was work, sacrifice, endurance. Wichapi Gleshka's hands stilled. She looked at Clara with new attention. Your mother was wise woman. She died before I could know her, but I carry her with me. Clara touched the necklace at her throat. This was hers. Cree patterns mixed with French techniques. She made it herself. The older woman reached out slowly, touched the beadwork with gentle fingers. She had skill and courage to mix traditions this way. Some people see mixing as weakness. She saw it as strength. Is that what you see? In me and Tasunka? Wichapi Gleshka was quiet for a long moment, her fingers still tracing the beadwork. I see possibility, also danger. Your children will belong to two worlds and no world. We'll be too white for some Lakota, too Lakota for whites. We'll face hatred from all sides. I know. But they will also have double strength, double wisdom. If they survive the hatred, they could build bridges we cannot imagine. The older woman released the necklace and returned to her beading. This is why I speak for you at council, not because I trust you completely, I don't, but because I trust my son's judgment, and because world is changing. We can change with it or die holding to past. I choose change. Clara's throat tightened. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Don't thank me yet. Being Lakota wife is hard, harder than you know, but I think you strong enough. We see. That evening, Tasunka took Clara to see the lodge that would be their home. It stood slightly apart from the main camp, new and clean-smelling, the hide walls decorated with paintings that depicted elk and horses and stars. I built it myself, he said, pulling back the entrance flap. With help from Changtewashtela and some of the other men. It's ours now, our home. Clara stepped inside, taking in the carefully arranged sleeping robes, the fire pit, the parfleches for storage. It was simple, but beautiful, and the knowledge that this was theirs, their space, their beginning, made her chest ache. It's perfect, she whispered. Tasunka came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. 2 more days. Then you move in here. Then we start our real life together. What we've had so far hasn't felt real. It's felt like dreaming, like something that could disappear if I looked away. His voice went rough. But after the ceremony, after the vows, after everyone acknowledges what we are to each other, then it becomes permanent, real, unbreakable. Clara turned in his arms, reached up to touch his face. I love you. Whether the ceremony happens or not, whether we have a lodge or not, I love you. I know, he kissed her softly. But I want the ceremony anyway. Want to stand before my people and claim you as mine. Want to give you gifts and speak vows and make promises that echo through generations. Then that's what we'll do. They stood together in their new lodge as the sun set, painting everything gold through the smoke hole above. This was what Clara had chosen. This man, this life, this future that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. And standing there wrapped in his arms, she knew she'd made the right choice. The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and cold, with frost coating every surface like scattered diamonds. Clara woke in Tashina's lodge for the last time, her stomach a knot of nerves and anticipation. Tashina and Wichapi Gleshka arrived before full light, bearing the ceremonial dress they'd spent days preparing. It was beautiful. Soft deerskin decorated with intricate quillwork and beading, dyed in earth tones that seemed to capture the prairie itself. "This was mine," Wichapi Gleshka said quietly as she helped Clara into it. "Wore it when I married Tasunka's father. Now you wear it. Is tradition mother gives dress to son's wife?" Clara's hands trembled as the older woman fastened the closures. "I'll honor you, I promise." "I know, is why I give it." Wichapi Gleshka stepped back, studying Clara with critical eyes. "You look like Lakota woman now. Almost believe it myself." Tashina smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "She is Lakota woman. Just took longer path to get here." They spent the next hours preparing Clara, braiding her hair with ornaments, painting her face with traditional markings, teaching her the responses she would need to make during the ceremony. Every detail carried meaning, every gesture significance. By the time the sun reached its peak, Clara felt transformed. When she caught her reflection in the polished metal, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back looked strong, prepared, ready to claim her place. The camp had gathered in a large circle around the ceremonial fire. Clara could see the whole community, men, women, children, elders, all dressed in their finest, all watching as Tasunka emerged from his lodge. He was magnificent. His ceremonial clothes were even more elaborate than what he'd worn to the council: quilled shirt, beaded leggings, his hair adorned with eagle feathers that marked him as a respected warrior. When his eyes found Clara across the distance, everything in his expression shifted to something that made her breath catch: pride, love, certainty. White Buffalo Bull stood by the fire, his voice carrying across the assembled people as he began the ceremony. He spoke in Lakota, the words rhythmic and formal, and though Clara couldn't understand most of them, she felt their weight. Tasunka walked forward first, carrying gifts for Clara's adopted family: blankets, tools, horses. He presented them to Wichapi Gleshka and Tashina with formal words that made both women nod approval. Then Clara walked forward, carrying the gifts she'd prepared with help from the women: carefully beaded items, preserved foods, a shirt she'd made herself under Vingyang Washteshni's exacting supervision. She offered them to Wichapi Gleshka with words Tashina had taught her: "Ichimani yaupo, mitakie oyasing." Walk humbly. All my relatives. Wichapi Gleshka accepted the gifts, then did something Clara hadn't expected. She pulled Clara into a brief, fierce embrace. "You are daughter now," she murmured. "Not born to me, but chosen. Remember this." Clara's eyes burned with tears as she nodded. The ceremony continued with exchanges of vows, blessings from the elders, songs that made the air itself feel sacred. And then Tasunka took Clara's hand and spoke words she'd been practicing for days. "Before our people, before the spirits of earth and sky, I claim you as my wife. I vow to protect you, provide for you, honor you all the days of my life. Your people become my people. Your path becomes my path. Where you go, I go. What you face, we face together." The Lakota version had been harder, but Clara spoke it now with all the care and precision she could muster. Her accent was still rough, her pronunciation imperfect, but the meaning came through clear. Tasunka's eyes shone as he responded with his own vows, promising partnership and protection, promising to build a life worthy of her courage. When White Buffalo Bull pronounced them married under Lakota law, the assembled people erupted in celebration. Drums began beating, voices lifted in song, and Tasunka pulled Clara close and kissed her while their entire community watched. "You're my wife now," he murmured against her lips. Mine. Yours, she agreed, and you're mine. The celebration lasted well into the night. Feasting, dancing, storytelling, laughter. People came forward to offer gifts and blessings, even some who'd been skeptical before. Children danced around the fire, their joy infectious. The drums seemed to beat in time with Clara's heart. Vingyang Washteshni approached with a gruff expression and a beautiful blanket she'd clearly spent weeks making. "You did good work on that hide last week," the older woman said in her heavily accented English. "Not perfect, but good. Keep practicing. You might not be completely useless someday." Coming from her, it was high praise. Clara accepted the blanket with genuine gratitude. "Thank you for teaching me, for not giving up on me." "Giving up is easy. Teaching is hard. You worth the hard work." Wingyang Washteshni patted her arm roughly. "You Lakota now. Act like it." Changta Washtela and Tashina came together, their children in tow. The boys, who'd taken to calling Clara their aunt, presented her with a carefully carved wooden horse they'd made themselves. "For you," the older boy said shyly in Lakota, "so you remember us when you moved to your own lodge." "I could never forget you," Clara said, pulling both boys into a hug. "You're family now." Tashina's eyes were suspiciously bright. "You did well today. Spoke the words clearly, showed respect, made us proud. Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." "You could have," Tashina disagreed, "but would have been harder. It's better to have sister's help." She squeezed Clara's hand. "You are sister now, true sister. You need anything, you come to me." As the celebration continued around them, Tasunka led Clara away from the fire toward their lodge. The drums still echoed behind them, but the noise gradually faded as they walked through the quiet camp. "How do you feel?" Tasunka asked as they reached the entrance. "Like everything just became real." Clara looked up at the stars scattered across the enormous sky. "Like my whole life led to this moment." "Mine too." He pulled her close. "Welcome home, wife." Wife. The word settled into Clara's bones like truth. She'd left behind her father's trading post, the only life she'd ever known, the safety of familiar walls and predictable days. She'd risked everything on love and faith and the belief that some things were worth fighting for. And standing here with Tasunka, their lodge waiting, their life together beginning, she knew she'd choose this path again without hesitation. "Take me inside," she whispered. "Take me home." Tasunka lifted her into his arms and carried her across the threshold of their lodge, into the firelight and warmth, into the beginning of everything they'd promised to build together. Behind them, the celebration continued, drums beating, voices singing, the Lakota people welcoming one more member into their circle, a white woman who'd proven herself worthy, a bridge between worlds, a testament to the power of choosing love over fear. And in the lodge, wrapped in each other's arms, Clara and Tasunka began writing their own story, one of partnership and courage, of two people who'd looked at the impossible and simply refused to accept it. The fire burned low as they lay together on the buffalo robes, skin against skin, hearts beating in rhythm. Outside, the drums still echoed faintly, but inside their lodge, the only sound was breathing and whispered promises. "I love you," Clara said into the darkness. "I love you," Tasunka replied. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days after." It was both ending and beginning, the conclusion of the journey that had brought them here, the start of the life they would build. And as Clara drifted toward sleep in her husband's arms, she thought of her mother's letter. Be brave. Be true. Be free. She had been. She was. She would continue to be. And it was enough. The first winter tested everything Clara thought she knew about endurance. She'd believed herself prepared. She'd worked hard through summer and autumn, learned the rhythms of camp life, earned a measure of acceptance. But when the snow came in earnest and the temperature dropped until breath froze in the air, Clara discovered new depths of difficulty she hadn't imagined. The lodge that had seemed cozy in autumn felt inadequate against the brutal cold. Keeping the fire burning required constant attention. Water had to be melted from snow. Food supplies dwindled despite careful rationing. And the work, hauling wood, processing hides, preparing meals, became exponentially harder when every task required first thawing frozen fingers. "You're shaking," Tasunka observed one particularly brutal morning as Clara tried to restart the fire that had died overnight. I'm fine, she said through chattering teeth. He crossed the lodge and wrapped a buffalo robe around her shoulders, then took over the fire building with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, flames crackled to life. You don't have to prove you can do everything alone, he said quietly. We're partners. That means sharing the burden. I know, Clara pulled the robe tighter. I don't want anyone thinking I'm weak, that I can't handle this life. You've been here 6 months. You've learned more than most people learn in years. No one thinks you're weak. He pulled her close, sharing his warmth. But winter is different. It breaks even the strongest people if they don't accept help. Clara leaned into him, drawing strength from his steady presence. Tell me it gets easier. It doesn't. You just get stronger. That became the pattern of their first winter together, Clara pushing herself to the edge of her limits, Tasunka catching her when she stumbled, both of them learning to balance independence with partnership. But winter brought more than just cold. In the darkest month, when snow lay thick and hunting was scarce, a delegation arrived from a settlement 2 days' ride south. 3 men on horseback, led by a face Clara recognized with sinking dread. Samuel Briggs, a rancher who'd traded at her father's post, a man with strong opinions about Indians and exactly where they belonged. The camp gathered as the men rode in, tension crackling through the cold air. White Buffalo Bull emerged to meet them, Tasunka and several other warriors flanking him. Clara stood with the women, her heart hammering. We're looking for Clara Whitmore, Briggs announced, his voice carrying across the camp. Her father sent word she might be here. White Buffalo Bull's expression remained neutral. Why do you seek her? To bring her home, where she belongs. Briggs's eyes scanned the crowd until they found Clara. His face twisted with disgust when he saw her dressed in Lakota clothing, standing among the native women. Christ almighty, so it's true. You actually married one of them. Clara stepped forward before anyone could stop her. I married my husband, and this is my home now. Like hell it is. Your father's worried sick, asked us to check on you, make sure you haven't been... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Coerced into anything against your will. I'm here by choice, my own free choice. Bullshit, Briggs spat into the snow. No white woman chooses this. Living like an animal, degrading yourself. Watch your mouth, Tasunka said quietly, stepping forward. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Briggs's hand moved toward his rifle, and suddenly 6 Lakota warriors had arrows nocked and ready. The other 2 settlers reached for their weapons, and the whole situation balanced on a knife edge. Stop! Clara shouted, moving between the 2 groups. Everyone just stop! She turned to Briggs, keeping her voice level despite the fury burning in her chest. You want to know if I'm here against my will? Look at me. Really look. Do I look like a prisoner? Do I look coerced? Briggs studied her. The confidence in her stance, the way she wore native clothing like it belonged to her. The hand that had unconsciously moved to rest on her stomach in a protective gesture that made his eyes widen. You're carrying, he said, shocked. You're pregnant with one of their... With my child, Tasunka interrupted, his voice steel. My wife carries my child, and if you finish that sentence the way you intended, there will be blood in this snow. Clara hadn't meant for anyone to know yet. She was barely 2 months along, still getting used to the idea herself. But Briggs's reaction, the naked disgust on his face, crystallized something in her. Yes, she said clearly, I'm pregnant. With my husband's baby, a child who will be loved and wanted and raised in 2 cultures. And if that offends you, Samuel Briggs, then you can ride back to my father and tell him I'm exactly where I choose to be. This is madness, Briggs hissed. You're throwing away everything, your reputation, your future, your own people, for what? For him? For love, Clara said simply. For a partnership built on respect and honesty. For a life that's real instead of safe. My father will understand. He loved my mother the same way. Your mother died because she made the same stupid choice. Tasunka moved so fast Briggs didn't have time to react. One moment he was on his horse, the next he was on the ground with Tasunka's knife at his throat. You will not speak of my wife's mother that way, Tasunka said, his voice deadly calm. You will not speak to my wife that way. You will deliver her message to her father and leave, or you will not leave at all. The other settlers had their guns drawn now, but the Lakota arrows remained trained on them, and everyone knew who would die first if shooting started. White Buffalo Bull stepped forward, his voice carrying authority. "Enough. This is sacred ground. We do not shed blood here without cause." He looked at Briggs. "The woman has spoken her choice. You will respect it. Take her words to her father, then do not return." Tasunka released Briggs and stepped back. The rancher scrambled to his feet, fury and humiliation warring on his face. "You're making a mistake," he spat at Clara. "When winter kills half this camp, when you're starving and sick and watching your half-breed baby die from cold, don't come crying back to civilization." "Get out," Clara said quietly, "before I let my husband finish what he started." Briggs and his men mounted and rode out, their departure watched by grim-faced warriors ready to respond to any threat. When they were finally out of sight, Clara's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Tasunka hadn't caught her, holding her against his chest as a reaction set in. "You're pregnant," he said into her hair, wonder and concern mixing in his voice. "When were you going to tell me?" "Soon. I wanted to be sure first." Clara's hands shook. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for everyone to find out like this." "I don't care how they found out." He pulled back to look at her face, his eyes shining. "We're having a baby. We're going to be parents." Despite everything, the confrontation, the threats, the fear still coursing through her, Clara smiled. "We are. Sometime next summer, if my counting is right." Tasunka kissed her softly, then lifted her into his arms and carried her toward their lodge, despite her protests that she could walk. The camp buzzed with conversation as they passed, some excited, some worried, all aware that the confrontation had raised the stakes of Clara's presence. A white woman living among them was one thing. A white woman bearing Lakota children was something else entirely. Inside their lodge, Tasunka set Clara down gently on the buffalo robes and built up the fire. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Really? I don't know." Clara's hand moved to her stomach again. "I'm scared. Not of the baby, but of what just happened. Briggs will spread word everywhere. More people will come, or worse, we'll handle it together." Tasunka sat beside her, pulled her close. "But Clara, you need to understand something. Having this baby, raising a child who's both Lakota and white, it won't be easy. Our child will face hatred from both sides. Will never fully belong to either world." "I know." Clara's voice was quiet but firm. "But they'll belong to us, and we'll teach them to be strong enough to make their own place in the world." "Yes," Tasunka agreed, "we will." That night, as they lay together in the firelight, Clara thought about her mother's letter again, about choosing love over fear, about being brave and true and free. She was building something her mother had only begun, a bridge between worlds, a family that defied easy categorization, a future that required courage to even imagine. And she was ready for it. The months that followed proved Briggs's visit was just the beginning. Word spread through the territory about Clara's pregnancy, and reactions ranged from fascination to fury. Some settlers saw it as betrayal. Some natives saw it as dilution of their people. But most simply watched and waited to see what would come of this unprecedented union. Ezra sent a letter via a trusted trader, and Clara cried when she read his words. "Daughter, Briggs came through and told me everything, though I suspect his version was more colorful than accurate. I want you to know I'm not angry, not disappointed. If you're happy, if you're loved, if you're building the life you want, then I'm proud of you. Your mother would be too. I'll visit in spring when the trails are clear, want to meet this son-in-law of mine properly, and want to see my grandchild when they arrive. Be safe. Be strong. Love, Papa." Clara carried that letter with her constantly, drawing strength from it when the weight of judgment felt too heavy. As her belly grew through late winter and into spring, the camp's attitude shifted subtly. Pregnancy was sacred to the Lakota, and watching Clara continue to work, hauling water, preparing hides, learning language, even while carrying a child, earned grudging respect from those who'd remained skeptical. Wichapi Gleshka became fiercely protective, monitoring Clara's health with hawkish attention. "You rest more," she commanded one afternoon when she caught Clara chopping wood. "Baby needs strength. You work too hard." "I'm fine. The baby is fine." "Baby is fine because I make sure you don't do stupid things." The older woman took the axe from Clara's hands. Sit. I teach you songs for baby. Better use of time. So Clara sat and learned the lullabies and blessing songs, her hands moving over her growing belly as Wichapi Gleshka's voice filled the air with melodies that felt ancient and eternal. Your baby will be special, the older woman said during one of these sessions. Born between worlds, will face hard path, but also will have gifts others don't have. Understanding both peoples, speaking both languages, carrying both strengths. You really believe that? That it's a gift and not just a burden? Wichapi Gleshka's expression turned serious. I believe world is changing. The old ways cannot hold forever. We need people who can walk between worlds, who can negotiate, translate, build bridges. Your children could be those people, if they're strong enough. We'll make sure they're strong enough. Yes, we will. Wichapi Gleshka's hand covered Clara's on her belly. This is my grandchild too. I will protect them as fiercely as I protect my own blood. The word settled into Clara's heart like a blessing. When spring finally arrived and the snow melted into rushing streams, Ezra came as promised. Clara saw him riding into camp and ran, waddled really, given how large her belly had grown, to meet him. Papa! Ezra dismounted and caught her in a careful hug, his eyes wet as he took in her appearance. The traditional dress, the braided hair, the way she moved through the Lakota camp like she belonged there. Look at you, he said roughly. You look like your mother, strong and beautiful and so damn sure of yourself. I'm not sure of anything, Clara admitted, but I'm trying. That's all anyone can do. He pulled back to study her belly. That's my grandchild in there? It is. Boy or girl? Won't know until they arrive, but healthy, active, kicks like a mule. Ezra laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Just like you did. Your mother used to say you were practicing your escape before you were even born. Tasunka approached with White Buffalo Bull, and Clara made the introductions. The two older men studied each other with the wariness of people from different worlds trying to find common ground. You're the man who married my daughter, Ezra said. I am. You treating her well? I'm trying to be worthy of her every day. Ezra's expression softened slightly. That's the right answer. He extended his hand. Ezra Whitmore. Figured it was time I met my son-in-law properly. They shook, and something unspoken passed between them. An understanding, perhaps, or mutual acknowledgement of what Clara meant to both of them. Ezra stayed for 3 days, and Clara watched two worlds she loved begin to bridge. Her father shared meals with Tasunka's family, traded stories with the elders, played with Tashina's children. It wasn't seamless. Language and cultural barriers remained, but genuine effort was made on both sides. On his last night, Ezra sat with Clara by the fire in her lodge. You did it, he said quietly. Built something new, something that might actually last. We're trying. It's not easy. Nothing worth having ever is. He pulled out a small wrapped bundle. I brought this for the baby. Was your mother's. Figured it should stay in the family. Clara unwrapped it to find a delicate baby blanket, beautifully woven, incorporating both European and native techniques. She made this? Clara asked, her voice breaking. For you. Spent months on it while she was pregnant, combining everything she knew about both her heritages. Wanted you wrapped in both worlds from your first breath. Ezra's eyes were wet. Thought maybe your baby should have the same. Clara held the blanket to her chest, overwhelmed. Thank you, Papa, for everything. For letting me go. For supporting this. For being here. Always, daughter, always. When summer arrived in full force, bringing heat that made Clara's swollen belly feel like torture, the baby decided it was time. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Wichapi Gleshka and Wingyang Washteshni and several other experienced women. Tasunka paced outside the lodge, tradition forbidding him entry until after the birth, his anxiety palpable to everyone who passed. Clara had never experienced pain like this, wave after wave that threatened to drown her. But between contractions, she thought of her mother, of what her mother had endured to bring Clara into the world, of the sacrifice and strength and love that had defined that final act. You can do this, Wichapi Gleshka said firmly as another contraction built. You are strong. Your mother was strong. Your daughter will be strong too. Daughter? Clara gasped. I know these things. Now push. Hours later, as the sun set in brilliant oranges and reds, a baby's cry filled the lodge. Clara collapsed back against the buffalo robes, exhausted beyond measure, as Wichapi Gleshka cleaned the infant and wrapped her in the blanket Clara's mother had made. A girl, the older woman said, her voice thick with emotion, healthy and loud and perfect. She placed the baby in Clara's arms, and Clara looked down at her daughter's face, still red and wrinkled from birth, but unmistakably beautiful. She had Tasunka's dark hair and eyes, but her features held something of Clara too, a blending that was entirely her own. Hello, Clara whispered. Hello, little one. I'm your mother, and I promise you, you are so loved, so wanted, so perfectly meant to be here. The baby's eyes opened, unfocused but searching, and Clara felt something in her chest crack open, a love so fierce and protective it bordered on savage. Can I bring him in? Winyang Washdeshni asked. Clara nodded, unable to speak. Tasunka entered the lodge, moving like he was walking on sacred ground. When he saw Clara holding their daughter, his face transformed into something Clara had never seen before, pure, overwhelming joy mixed with awe. Come meet your daughter, Clara said softly. He knelt beside them, reaching out with trembling hands to touch the baby's tiny fingers. She's perfect. She is. What should we name her? Clara had been thinking about this for months. I want to give her both our heritages, a Lakota name and an English name, so she knows she belongs to both worlds equally. Tasunka nodded slowly. In Lakota, Wichapi Washte, good star, for the hope she represents. Wichapi Washte, Clara repeated, testing the sounds. It's beautiful. And in English, hope, for the same reason. Hope Wichapi Washte red elk, Tasunka said. Born between two worlds, carrying both forward. Their daughter, Hope, Wichapi Washte, made a small sound, and both parents looked down at her with matching expressions of wonder. She's going to change everything, Clara said. She already has. The weeks after Hope's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feeding and learning to be parents. But they were also filled with unexpected joy, watching Tasunka sing lullabies in Lakota, seeing Wichapi Gleshka cradle her granddaughter with tears streaming down her face, witnessing Tashina's boys declare themselves Hope's protectors. The camp embraced the baby with the same fierceness they reserved for all their children. She was Lakota, born to the tribe, regardless of her mother's white heritage. And that acceptance meant more to Clara than any ceremony or formal declaration could. Ezra returned when Hope was a month old, bringing gifts and news from the trading post. He held his granddaughter with the careful reverence of a man who'd lost too much and now treasured what remained. She has your mother's eyes, he said to Clara, that same fierce light, like she's already planning how to take on the world. She is, Clara agreed. She's going to be unstoppable, just like her mother. As Hope grew through that first summer and into autumn, Clara and Tasunka began to see their vision take shape. The trading post, which Ezra had officially transferred to Clara's ownership, became a true neutral ground where both Lakota and settlers could meet. Clara used her unique position to negotiate trades, translate communications, and slowly, painfully, build understanding between groups that had been at odds for generations. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and conflicts and moments when violence seemed inevitable. But having Hope, having a child who literally embodied both worlds, made people pause, made them think twice about what they were fighting for and what they were willing to destroy. One evening, when Hope was nearly a year old, Clara sat outside their lodge watching the sunset while her daughter played in the grass nearby. Tasunka emerged and settled beside her, his arm draping around her shoulders in comfortable familiarity. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That we did it. Against all odds, all warnings, all the voices telling us it was impossible. We built this." She gestured to encompass everything: their lodge, their daughter, the camp that had become home, the trading post that stood as neutral ground. "We did, but it's not finished." "No," Clara agreed. "It's just beginning. Hope is going to have siblings. They're going to grow up belonging to both worlds, learning both languages, both traditions. And they're going to build bridges we can't even imagine yet. You want more children? I want a whole family. I want our lodge filled with voices and laughter and the chaos of children learning who they are. Clara leaned into him. I want to keep building what we started, making it stronger with every generation. Tasunka kissed her temple. Then that's what we'll do. Hope chose that moment to stumble over to them, her step still unsteady but determined. Tasunka caught her and swung her up, making her laugh with delight. What do you think, little star? He asked her in Lakota. Should we fill our lodge with brothers and sisters for you? Hope babbled something incomprehensible but enthusiastic, and both parents laughed. The years that followed proved both harder and more rewarding than Clara had imagined. She and Tasunka had 3 more children, 2 boys and another girl, each one carrying the same blend of heritages, each one learning to navigate 2 worlds with increasing confidence. The trading post grew into something unprecedented, a genuine meeting place where Lakota and settlers negotiated not just trades but treaties, where children from both cultures played together, where understanding slowly replaced suspicion. It wasn't perfect. There were still incidents, still people on both sides who refused to accept the changing world. But Clara and Tasunka stood firm, their growing family proof that different peoples could build something together instead of tearing each other apart. Wichapi Gleshka lived to see all her grandchildren born, teaching them songs and stories, ensuring they knew their Lakota heritage as deeply as they knew their white heritage. Before she died, peacefully, in her sleep, surrounded by family, she told Clara something that stayed with her forever. You proved me wrong, the older woman said, her voice thin but strong. I thought you would break, thought the cost would be too high, but you didn't break. You bent and adapted and became stronger. You are Lakota woman, not despite being born white, but because you chose this path and walked it with courage. Thank you, Clara whispered, for giving me the chance, for believing in Tasunka's choice, even when you had doubts. Thank my son. He saw in you what took me longer to see. He chose well. Wichapi Gleshka's hand gripped Clara's weakly. Protect his heart. Raise our grandchildren strong. Keep building bridges. This is your purpose. I will. I promise. 2 decades after Clara first arrived in the Lakota camp, she stood with Tasunka watching Hope, now a young woman of 20, negotiate a complex trade agreement between tribal leaders and territorial representatives. Their daughter moved between languages with fluid ease, commanded respect from both sides, and demonstrated exactly the kind of bridge building Clara and Tasunka had hoped their children would achieve. She's magnificent, Clara said softly. She's her mother's daughter, Tasunka replied. Stubborn and brave and refusing to accept that anything is impossible. Clara laughed. I seem to remember you being pretty stubborn yourself, walking into that trading post 20 years ago and deciding you'd found your wife. Best decision I ever made. He pulled her close, and after 2 decades together, the gesture still felt like coming home. You know what I remember most from those first days? What? The way you looked at me when I told you I wanted to devour you. Like you were terrified and exhilarated at the same time. I was. Still am sometimes. Good. His eyes held that same intensity that had first shaken her breath all those years ago. Because I still look at you the same way. Like you want to devour me? Always. Clara laughed and kissed him, there in front of the whole camp, in front of their children and grandchildren and the community they'd spent 20 years building. Around them, life continued, children playing, women preparing meals, men returning from hunts, the eternal rhythm of a people adapting to a changing world. And at the center of it all, 2 people who'd chosen each other over fear, over prejudice, over every voice that had told them it was impossible. Their story had become legend, whispered around fires, told to children as an example of courage, remembered as proof that love could bridge even the deepest divides. But for Clara and Tasunka, it wasn't a legend. It was simply their life, the one they'd fought for, built together, and would continue building until their final breath. As the sun set over the Montana prairie, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson, Clara looked at the man beside her and felt the same fierce certainty she'd felt 20 years ago in the cottonwood grove. This was where she belonged. This was who she was meant to be. This was the life worth every sacrifice, every struggle, every moment of doubt. And she would choose it again and again and again, forever.